chosen one. You did not stumble into this pattern by accident, and you were never meant to remain blind to it. There is a reason the same energy, the same face, the same initial keeps echoing through your life like a whisper you cannot ignore. You thought it was coincidence, maybe even misfortune, but deep within, something in you always knew it was more. This is not about being trapped for punishment. This is about being shaped, refined, and tested in ways only a chosen soul could endure. What you call a cycle is actually a forge, and what you feel as confusion is the beginning of awakening. You keep asking yourself why it repeats. Why the same kind of connection, the same emotional pull, the same rise and fall that leaves you both empowered and exhausted. Jay is not just a person, not just a name, not just a moment. It is a symbol placed into your life with precision. It is a mirror, reflecting the parts of you that are still unguarded, still searching, still vulnerable to illusions dressed as destiny. Every time Jay appears, it touches a wound you thought had healed and a hope you thought you understood. That is not cruelty. That is design, because armor is not built in comfort. It is not given in peace. Spiritual armor is forged through repetition, through patterns that force you to confront what you keep avoiding. You are not being tested because you are weak. You are being tested because you are capable of carrying something greater. And before you can carry it, you must learn discernment, restraint, and inner authority. Jay enters your life when you are at a threshold, not when you are stable, not when you are fully grounded, but when you are on the edge of becoming something new. And at that exact moment, this presence appears and disrupts everything. It feels like connection, like alignment, like something meant to be. But beneath that surface is a deeper purpose. It exposes your attachments. It reveals your patterns. It shows you where you still seek validation outside yourself. And each time you fall into the cycle, you feel it more intensely. The beginning feels powerful, almost divine. You feel seen, understood, chosen. But then comes the shift, the confusion, the distance, the questions that have no clear answers. And suddenly, you are no longer standing in certainty. You are back in introspection, forced to look at yourself again. This is where most people break the pattern unconsciously. They blame the other person. They call it bad luck. They shut down and build walls that are not armor, but fear disguised as protection. But you are not most people. You feel the pattern because you are meant to understand it. You are meant to see beyond the surface and recognize the lesson embedded within the repetition. The cycle is not there to keep you stuck. It is there to show you that you are still responding from the same place. Each time Jay returns, it is not the same situation repeating. It is a deeper level of the same lesson. The first time, it tests your awareness. The second time, it tests your discipline. The third time, it tests your transformation. And if you have not fully integrated what you were meant to learn, the cycle continues, not as punishment, but as refinement. Because spiritual armor is not just about strength. It is about clarity. It is about knowing when something feels right, but is not aligned. It is about recognizing emotional intensity without mistaking it for truth. It is about standing in your own energy so firmly that nothing external can pull you out of it without your consent. Jay is the catalyst that reveals where your armor is still incomplete. It shows you where you still hesitate, where you still doubt yourself, where you still abandon your inner knowing for the sake of connection. And every time you choose differently, even in the smallest way, you are not breaking the cycle by force. You are dissolving it through awareness. You were never meant to escape this pattern by running from it. You were meant to outgrow it, to reach a point where the same energy appears, but it no longer has power over you, where the same situation unfolds, but you respond from a place that is no longer reactive. That is when the cycle ends. Not when J disappears, but when you no longer need what J represents. There is a reason it feels so personal, so specific, so targeted, because it is. This is not a general lesson given to everyone. This is tailored to your path, your calling, your potential. The more you resist seeing it, the more intense it becomes. Not because you are being punished, but because your soul is refusing to let you stay at a level you have already outgrown. And deep down, you feel it. You feel that this is bigger than just a person or a situation. You feel that there is something being activated within you every time this happens. Something that forces you to question your choices, your boundaries, your sense of self. That discomfort is not there to break you. It is there to rebuild you with stronger foundations, because what is coming for you requires a version of you that cannot be easily shaken. A version of you that does not confuse emotional intensity with alignment. A version of you that does not chase what feels familiar if it is not truly meant. And the only way to become that version is to face the patterns that keep pulling you back into old responses. J is the training ground. The place where you learn to hold your energy, to trust your intuition, to walk away when something does not align, even if it feels powerful in the moment. It teaches you that not everything that feels destined is meant to stay. Some things are meant to pass through your life just long enough to change you. And every time you recognize the pattern a little sooner, every time you choose yourself a little stronger, every time you refuse to abandon your inner knowing, you are adding another layer to your armor. Not armor that isolates you, but armor that protects your truth. Armor that allows you to engage with the world without losing yourself in it. You begin to notice the shift. The same triggers no longer have the same effect. The same situations no longer pull you as deeply. You start to see the pattern as it unfolds, not after it has already consumed you. And in that awareness, you gain power. Not control over others, but control over your own responses. This is the moment where the cycle starts to lose its grip. Not because it disappears instantly, but because you are no longer feeding it unconsciously. You are no longer reacting from old wounds. You are responding from a place of understanding, and that changes everything. Because the purpose was never to trap you permanently. It was to prepare you, to sharpen your awareness, to strengthen your boundaries, to deepen your connection with yourself. And once that purpose is fulfilled, the pattern has no reason to continue in the same way. But until then, it will keep showing up in different forms, with different faces, but carrying the same essence. And each time, you will have a choice: to fall back into the familiar, or to step into the version of yourself that has learned, that has grown, that has become more grounded in truth. And the more you choose that higher version of yourself, the more you realize that what once felt like a trap was actually a path that was guiding you, shaping you, preparing you for something that requires not just strength, but wisdom. Not just resilience, but clarity. You are not stuck. You are in the middle of becoming. And every repetition, every encounter, every moment of confusion is part of a process that is far more intentional than it appears on the surface. The question is not why it keeps happening. The question is what it is trying to show you that you have not fully seen yet. Because once you truly see it, once you truly understand it, once you truly embody the lesson, instead of just recognizing it intellectually, something shifts within you in a way that cannot be undone. And from that point forward, You no longer move through these experiences the same way. You no longer interpret them the same way. You no longer respond from the same place. And that is where the transformation begins to take hold in a way that is no longer temporary, but deeply rooted in who you are becoming as you continue to walk this path with a level of awareness that makes it impossible to return to who you were before you started noticing the pattern in the first place. And once that awareness settles into you, it begins to change not just how you respond to J, but how you respond to everything that tries to enter your life carrying the same frequency. You start to see that it was never about one person repeating, it was about one lesson echoing through different forms, until you could finally hear it clearly without distortion. Because before, you were listening with desire. Now, you are learning to listen with discernment. There is a difference between something that excites your spirit and something that aligns with your purpose. In the beginning, J feels like both. That is why it is so powerful. That is why it pulls you in so deeply. It speaks to a part of you that is still learning the language of intuition. It mimics alignment so closely that only experience can teach you the difference. And that is why the cycle repeats. Not because you are failing, but because you are still learning to distinguish truth from emotional illusion. Chosen one, understand this clearly. Not everything that awakens something in you is meant to stay with you. Some connections are ignitions, not destinations. They are meant to spark awareness, not become your foundation. But when you do not yet know how to separate the spark from the structure, you try to build a life on something that was only meant to wake you up. And that is where the cycle tightens. That is where confusion grows. That is where you begin to feel trapped, not realizing you are trying to hold onto something that was never designed to be held. J carries a frequency that interacts directly with your unhealed expectations. It amplifies your longing for recognition, your desire to feel deeply connected, your hope that something external will finally match what you feel internally. And when it appears, it feels like confirmation, like everything you have been waiting for has finally arrived. But then it shifts, and that shift is not random. It is the reveal. It is the moment where illusion starts to separate from truth. It is where the lesson actually begins. Because up until that point, you are still inside the experience, still wrapped in the feeling, still identifying with the connection. But when the shift happens, you are forced into observation. You are forced to step back and question what you are experiencing instead of simply feeling it. This is where your armor is being forged most intensely, not in the connection itself, but in the moment where the connection no longer feels the same. Because that is where your choices matter the most. That is where you either return to old patterns, chasing, overanalyzing, seeking clarity from the outside, or you begin to turn inward, grounding yourself in your own awareness, trusting what you feel without needing external validation to confirm it. And this is not easy. It was never meant to be easy, because if it were easy, it would not create strength. It would not create transformation. It would not prepare you for what you are truly meant to hold. You are being trained to stand firm in uncertainty, to trust yourself even when things do not make sense, to recognize misalignment even when it is wrapped in familiarity, to walk away from something that feels powerful because you can see that it is not stable. That is armor. Armor is not emotional numbness. It is not detachment from experience. It is not shutting yourself off from connection. It is the ability to feel deeply without losing your center, to engage without abandoning yourself, to recognize when something is pulling you out of alignment, and choose differently, even when it is uncomfortable. And every cycle with J strengthens that ability. At first, you may not notice it. You may feel like you are going through the same thing again and again. But look closer. Look at how you respond now compared to before. Look at how quickly you recognize the pattern. Look at how your intuition speaks louder, sooner, clearer than it did the last time. That is progress. That is the forging. You are not where you were when this began. Even if the situation looks similar, you are seeing more, feeling more, understanding more. And that means the cycle is already weakening, even if it has not fully dissolved yet. Because cycles do not break through force. They break through awareness sustained over time. And the more you sustain that awareness, the more the illusion loses its power. You begin to notice things you once overlooked. The subtle inconsistencies, the emotional fluctuations, the way your energy shifts when you are around this presence. You start to realize that what you once interpreted as depth was sometimes just intensity without grounding. That what felt like connection was sometimes just familiarity with a pattern you have experienced before. And that realization is not meant to make you cynical. It is meant to make you clear. Clarity is one of the strongest forms of spiritual armor you can possess. Because when you are clear, you are not easily swayed by temporary emotions. You are not easily pulled into cycles that no longer serve you. You can see things for what they are, even when they appear in forms that once would have confused you. And as that clarity grows, something else begins to happen. Your attraction shifts. You no longer feel pulled toward the same patterns with the same intensity. What once felt irresistible begins to feel questionable. What once felt like destiny begins to feel like a test you have already studied for. And this is where many chosen ones hesitate. Because there is a strange comfort in the familiar, even when the familiar is not healthy. There is a part of you that recognizes the pattern and almost wants to return to it. Not because it is right, but because it is known. Because it requires less uncertainty than stepping fully into the unknown. But this is where your growth demands a decision. You cannot carry your new awareness and continue to choose old patterns without creating internal conflict. You cannot see clearly and still pretend not to understand what is happening. At some point, you have to align your actions with your awareness. And that alignment is what completes the forging process. Because armor is not just built through realization. It is solidified through action. Through choosing differently when it matters. Through standing firm when you would have once given in. Through trusting yourself, even when the outcome is not immediately clear. J is not there to stay in your life forever in the way you once imagined. It is there to teach you something that you will carry into every future connection, every future decision, every future version of yourself. It is preparing you for a level of alignment that cannot coexist with confusion. Because where you are going, there is no room for repeated uncertainty disguised as connection. There is no space for patterns that pull you away from yourself. There is only clarity, stability, and alignment that feels calm, not chaotic. But before you can fully step into that, you have to release your attachment to what you thought J was supposed to be, not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with understanding. Understanding that it served its purpose, that it played its role in your growth, that it showed you parts of yourself you needed to see, that it activated something within you that you are now responsible for integrating. And when you reach that level of understanding, the cycle does not end with drama. It ends with quiet clarity, with a moment where you realize that what once had power over you no longer does. Where you can look at the same situation The same energy, the same presence, and feel grounded instead of pulled, where your decisions are no longer driven by emotional waves, but by inner stability. That is when the armor is complete enough for the next phase, because this was never the final destination. This was preparation. Preparation for connections that will not require you to question your worth. Preparation for paths that will not pull you into confusion. Preparation for a version of yourself that moves with certainty, not hesitation. And once you step into that version, you will understand why the cycle had to be so persistent, why it had to repeat, why it had to feel so real. Because anything less would not have shaped you the way this has. Anything less would not have forced you to grow beyond your comfort, beyond your patterns, beyond your previous understanding of yourself. And now, as you stand in this awareness, you are no longer the same person who first encountered Jay. You carry more insight, more strength, more clarity. But the process is not finished yet, because there is still one more layer to this that you are beginning to sense, even if you cannot fully articulate it yet. There is still a deeper realization forming within you, something that goes beyond understanding the pattern and begins to touch on why you were chosen to experience it in this specific way, at this specific intensity, at this specific point in your life. And as that realization starts to rise to the surface, you begin to feel a shift that is not just about breaking a cycle, but about stepping into a completely different level of awareness, where the lessons are no longer externalized through repeating phases, but internalized through a steady, unshakable knowing that changes how you move, how you choose, how you trust, and how you recognize what is truly meant for you, versus what was only ever meant to prepare you for it. And that is where the next phase of your transformation begins to unfold in a way that no longer relies on repetition to teach you, because you have finally become the one who understood the same kind of shun once felt like a trap. One reveals itself an impressible wreck trap, but now not the serotoninal processes of spiritual movement by the hazard and more than the possibles in being between the self to the human way and the town and one monolithic time if ever later about an ill woman and the ruling what war they won and all the scene polyphonically one and making it statue as an inward that no one rule in all element movement the principle necessarily and world when they are night and that that's it one forms all the technique. That's really the seconds in line. And you can start again, and then we'll have a different how. Look at that, we'll find out even there, we'll talk a little bit different. Hard off my father, thanks to that Lord. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet certainty that settles deep within you. You begin to understand that the power was never in J, never in the repetition, never in the emotional intensity that once felt so consuming. The power was always in your response, in your awareness, in your willingness to grow beyond what once held you. You can feel it now, the difference. The same energy no longer shakes you the way it used to. The same patterns no longer pull you in unconsciously. There is space between the trigger and your reaction, and in that space, you have found something that cannot be taken from you, choice. And with that choice comes freedom. Not the kind of freedom that runs away or avoids, but the kind that stands still, observes, and decides from a place of inner stability. You are no longer chasing clarity from outside yourself. You are no longer waiting for someone else to confirm what you already feel. You are no longer confusing intensity with truth. You have become steady, and that steadiness is what you were being prepared for all along, because the life that is unfolding for you requires a version of you that is anchored, not easily swayed, not easily distracted, not easily pulled into cycles that drain your energy and cloud your vision. It requires you to trust yourself, even when something feels familiar, but is no longer aligned. It requires you to walk forward without needing to revisit what you have already outgrown. J was never your destination. It was the resistance that built your strength, the reflection that sharpened your awareness, the experience that forced you to meet yourself on a deeper level than you ever had before. It was the pressure that revealed your weaknesses so they could become your strengths. It was the repetition that turned confusion into clarity, reaction into intention, and attachment into understanding. And now you carry that understanding with you, not as a lesson you remember, but as a way of being. You no longer need the cycle to teach you, because you have integrated what it was trying to show you. You no longer need the same pattern to appear, because you would recognize it instantly and choose differently without hesitation. You no longer need the same kind of connection to awaken something in you, because you are already awake to it within yourself. This is what it means to be forged, not broken and rebuilt, but refined and strengthened until you can stand in your own energy without losing yourself in anything that is not truly meant for you. Until you can feel deeply without being controlled by what you feel. Until you can recognize truth without needing it to be repeated in painful ways. And as you move forward, you will notice that what comes into your life begins to match this new version of you. Not chaotic, not confusing, not filled with uncertainty, but grounded, clear, and aligned in a way that feels different from anything you have experienced before. Because you are different now. You are no longer moving from the same place, and because of that, you will no longer attract the same lessons in the same form. What once had to repeat itself to get your attention no longer needs to, because you are already paying attention. You are already aware. You are already aligned with a deeper understanding that guides you without force. And in that, the cycle completes itself, not through struggle, not through resistance, but through transformation. You were never trapped. You were being trained. And now, you are ready to walk forward, not as someone caught in patterns, but as someone who has mastered what those patterns were trying to teach, carrying within you a strength that was not given, but earned through every moment you chose to see, to understand, and to become more than what once held you.